You're muted. Do you know you're muted? Okay.
Yes, I am muted. I just said that and you couldn't hear me. That's right. Thank you so much. President Daniels, members of the board, staff, Ms. Halley, thank you for being here today. Certainly, part of our goal is to continuously improve. And in our Plan, Do, Study, Act model in Kent School District, it supports not only our students, our teachers, our building administrators and support staff at central admin, and certainly most importantly, our school board directors. And so today we are going to review, and certainly I know that you will be helping to facilitate this process, 2 documents. And if you should have access to both. That if you'd like, would you prefer that I share my screen? Both documents are available on BoardDocs, as you know. What would be most or easiest for the board?
I think for the streaming, it probably would be easiest to have them
share.
Have you share your screen.
Absolutely.
Although I have them up, so but
perfect.
Just so they can
make sure they're shared. And if you want to follow along either way, just one moment.
Thank you.
For some reason, I can't get the policy 1600 to open. I don't know if it's just a me thing.
I will make sure.
I had trouble getting it to open too. I had to download it and then it worked.
I'll try that.
But right now we're reviewing our goals, right? Our board goals. And do you have that? Okay.
That works for me. Yes. Okay. I was just trying to prepare.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I have the protocols and my apologies. I'll make sure. I'll share the. Just 1 second. Thank you for your patience. Just 1 second. Okay, can you see that? Not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So our board goals as of September 30th, 2020, 2021. The first goal, as you can see, goal 1, evaluation of metrics and monitoring. First item for goal 1, superintendent evaluation meetings will be done semi-annually with the intent of setting SMART achievable goals and new goals set by July 1 for the coming school year. As of year 2020, we'll have an exception, as we note, as SMART goals will not be set until the end of October 2020 with the superintendent and the board facing a pandemic year. And that has, as we know, created many more issues of regularity falling behind due to pressing issues taking precedence. Long story short, obviously the impact of COVID is real and it has impacted our ability to conduct those evaluation and metric monitoring. That said, I'll open it up for feedback, noticings, wonderings as we move forward. And absent of that, we'll continue.
So essentially we're accomplishing item 3 because we're progress monitoring now.
Right.
And we did accomplish number 1, essentially, even with noting that we did it late. So for number 2, review and monitoring of prioritized metrics, current calendar year initiatives done by the Strategic Planning Committee, done semi-annually by the end of the school year. I know we had a recent meeting about the Strategic Planning Committee. So where do we stand right now with that?
Thank you, Vice President Bettinger, regarding our process for strategic planning. I can tell you that we are in the midst of, obviously in the midst of COVID. We do have our plans to convene and to really to begin again the process for determining what our core values against our mission, our vision, our current state. Remember asking those broad questions which help us get started. Where are we? Monitoring our current status as a school district, operationally, instructionally, socially, emotionally. Where do we want to be? How will we get there? And how will we know when we've arrived? That's the beginning of our next iteration, and Dr. Harmon and team will be processing and facilitating that process.
Okay, so is the committee set? Has a committee, I know that was going to be by the end of March, a committee would have been seated. Has that been seated?
The committee has not been fully formed. We do have certainly individuals who are ready to help facilitate. And once we have gotten through what I would call the initial robust nature of our return to reopening, we will be moving forward to ensure that process begins well before, obviously, the end of the year. That's our goal. And our goal has been and continues to be before 2021 is concluded.
Okay, great.
Can I ask if there is a place where all of this is stored, easily accessible? I'm looking at like the team site. I just curious because again, I don't know. I'm still playing the new card for a sec. I'm just wondering like where all these are going to be at. Can I find the goals? Can I find for under goal 1? Can I find all those sub categories somewhere?
As far as
they're on SharePoint. Under
Thank
the
you.
board, under the board.
And we can certainly direct you to that. And that's, you don't have to worry about certainly playing the new card. It's about asking the right questions. And what we also know is there are quite a few platforms that we use in our goal.
Yes.
Melissa will be also one of the first to share with you that we have done a great deal of work in streamlining our processes, and we still have some work left to do. But our goal is to simplify, and I hear that loudly, clearly. So we'll continue supporting that work.
Okay, but so they will be in the SharePoint. I'm assuming
Yes.
the team site's SharePoint, just where all of our other board documents and information is.
That is correct.
Okay, perfect.
May I please ask a clarifying question? So, Director Benno, you're asking about where the metrics monitoring is that supports these goals. Is that correct? Not for the actual goals document itself?
Well, the goals document, yes, but also like the metrics as well. Is there a place where all of those are housed so I can see?
Right. Yeah, that is a question I would have too.
So part of the actual blueprint document is housed on our website as well. And so part of that, and I guess I'll ask for just some clarity and maybe we can meet to discuss specifically what it is that you wanted to see. But the actual document itself is located on the website.
Well, I guess the current calendar year initiatives, but I guess if there's no committee seated, then they haven't even come up with the current calendar year initiatives yet that we're going to be reviewed and monitored. Is that correct?
And that would be a clarifying question, I think, for Director Bent. Are you wanting to know what we've done thus far? Obviously, we've not conducted additional ongoing metrics or evaluation for 2021 because we have not started that process yet.
Right.
That would be my, to
Okay.
answer that. Yeah. So like the idea of like reviewing and monitoring the prioritized metrics. So like if we're going to look for what the prioritized metrics are and the review and monitoring of that, where
Right.
would that be housed? And I'm assuming it would be on the SharePoint document or the progress monitoring of the, like what we're doing now. This is going to be housed eventually on that SharePoint site.
That is correct.
Okay.
And remember, and just so we're on the same page, we have a document that supported the continuous improvement cycle from 2016 to 2021 in that 5-year period. As we are coming to a close, obviously we're coming to a close in a very tumultuous time. Before we can actually begin the process, to Vice President Bettinger's question, and certainly to all of our board members' questions, before we can truly begin the process of improving upon where we've been, we have to know exactly where we are right now. And so that will be the first step in determining what is our current state, where are we? And then asking those follow-up questions. Where do we want to be as an organization? That will include feedback from all stakeholders, including our board. How will we get there? And what programs, initiatives will we employ? What staff will we employ to make sure this happens? And then most importantly, how will we know when we've done it well? What does that measurement look like? Yeah. So that's 1, 2, 3, essentially reviewing, monitoring, and obviously progress monitoring of board goals semi-annually. So that's the first step.
It might be helpful too. So Director Benno, they're all in the Board of Directors OneDrive. So there's folders. So you should have access. If you haven't, I mean, one of us will probably be happy to walk you through and kind of show you where things are on there if you haven't had an opportunity already.
I want to go back to number 1, if you don't mind, that we kind of race through this. And I'm going to actually say that it's sad that I've been at this a year and so many months, but I need clarification when we're saying July 1st for the coming school year. We're actually supposed to be in the process of new goals for 21-22 by July 1st. Am I correct?
Can you allow Director Benno to answer the question I asked first? He was going to speak and you started speaking.
Director Benno, so Director Hamada, just one moment, we'll come back to your question. Sure. Director Benno, did you have a follow-up, please?
Oh yeah, I guess I'm not sure. I'm going to look for the OneDrive because I obviously have access to it. I don't think I've ever looked at that. So I hate to say that out loud, but I'm going to be honest.
So we can set up some time. It's okay. We can set up some time to help you and navigate that. So
And specifically, absolutely. President Daniels, what I was going to suggest as well is that I know everyone has met Ms. Santello, who will be supporting our board, and obviously Ms. Halley. We're working together right now to delineate roles and responsibilities and how best to support our board. This is one area, so just know, Director Benno, there's not going to be a test where to find it, but most importantly, we want to get you what you need and help you be able to navigate these platforms as easily as possible, okay? Yes. So we're noting that, yes.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay. Director Hamada, thank you for your patience, yes.
And I apologize, Joe, if I cut you off. I thought you were done. Forgive me. I want, again, on number 1, when we're talking about July 1st, so are we talking about July 1st for 21 and then going into 22? The school years here kind of mixed me up a little bit here, and we have, your superintendent evaluation instrument for 2020, 2021. But if we're talking about next year, it goes into 2022 school year, correct?
That's correct.
And I'm confused a little bit on that. Do we already have July 1 goals set, which is the 2021, or are we supposed to be in the process of setting new goals for 21, 22? I'm confused.
Director Hamada, you're asking regarding superintendent evaluation, or you're talking about board goals, which just want to be
number 1.
Okay.
Superintendent evaluation meetings will be done. We're doing that ongoingly with the intent of setting smart, achievable goals and new goals. The new goal set by July 1st is what's throwing me. Is that for the 2021, 2022 school year then?
That's correct.
And so when do we start that process? Because we're still working on 2021, right?
Well, we're monitoring 2021 and evaluating 2021 at the end of this year. And so simultaneously, much like board goals, much like our strategic plan, the cycle for improvement is continuous. And that's what we refer to as the plan, do, study, act, or the continuous improvement cycle. So when we come to what is referred to as the ending point for evaluating a process, whether it's board goals or superintendent evaluation or a strategic planning process, at the end of that cycle, we are also simultaneously preparing for the beginning of the next cycle. And so to use superintendent evaluation, while the end of this year will be the culmination of the superintendent evaluation cycle, we will have, when we're doing this well, we will have already reviewed, processed, and at least created a draft plan of what are the goals that I would be measured against for the 21-22 academic year. And the same process would follow for board goals.
Right, but the school, yeah, the school year ends like, you know, in the middle of June. And I would assume we would have to have that evaluation done by then, right? The 2021 evaluation. And that only gives us, if by July 1st, you have to have all these new goals set. I'm just wondering, how does that work then? That's a pretty quick turnaround to create a whole new draft for, you know, in a couple of weeks, right?
Well, it's April now. We're almost into May.
Right.
So we have the full month of May and the full month of June. And as long as we're adhering to setting achievable, specific, relevant, time-bound goals by July 1st for the coming school year, that would fall within the expectations that we've set according to this document. But
how can we draft new goals if we're not at the end of what we did with 2021? I mean, I'm confused about the process. I mean, are you saying right now we're doing both simultaneously?
So I'll give you maybe the best way that I can explain is the way that I understand is through analogies. And let's say I want to become a healthier individual by the end of this year, by July 1st. I may not have reached my goal, but I may be making progress towards that goal by exercising or changing my diet or drinking more water. Mm-hmm. If those three leading indicators have helped me to reach my goal, I may not have met the actual metric, but I may be moving closer to that goal than ever before. Then mm-hmm. it would stand to reason that would I consider changing those metrics if I were actually making progress toward the goal. I might just say, you know what, if I keep following this plan, then it seems to stand to reason that I might be closer to my goal. So those goals, we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel is what I'm saying sometimes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So, you know, like if we had a graduation rate and increase and we met that goal, then we'd probably have in a new draft that we want to continue with more of a percentage of increase. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's a great analogy. And one example of what most organizations fail to do sometimes is think about what you just said and what I said earlier, that when we're making progress, we have to also determine what's the effectiveness of the implementation, right? If there were 8 steps to a process, did we follow all 8 steps? And then if we met our goal, we can look back and say, you know what, we did everything we were supposed to do and we saw the results we desired. That means it's a good indication we should probably continue in that direction.
If we didn't, we tweak it. I'm beginning to sort of, I mean, this has been, you know, these evaluations, even when we did them and stuff the first time around, was complex for me to get a handle on. And because we've had so many things thrown at us with the pandemic and everything. So I'm not trying, I mean, I really want to get this clear in my head.
Absolutely.
So, and the problem I have is it seems like we sometimes get the stuff that we have to do this stuff in such a short turnaround. And I just would like to see more deliberation. And so I'm trying to understand that. So how, when we're going through analyzing, we had one meeting on, you know, going over evaluations. At that particular meeting, how could have we been working on 21, 22 goals then? We couldn't really, could we?
being that it was your first year, and I think we had talked about this earlier, you had not necessarily seen or had access to the evaluation tool. There was some ramping up or some learning that needed to take place. After a full year, it doesn't mean that we're all experts, but it means that we know more than we did a year ago. And so what I would I guess I would ask you, would it make sense that we would continue to monitor certainly our progress thus far, determine what goals make sense for us to monitor as a school district, and then make sure that we are processing or taking time to process at periodic times throughout the year. That's part of our pre-planning, which I think we can always do a better job. And I'm saying that from our team. But I'm also saying that for our board superintendent governance team as well.
Yeah, I think I guess what I'm having in the pre-planning and is I'm just having a little difficulty with that, I guess, and because I try to be I try to take a proactive approach to things, and it seems like we're really reactive to a lot of stuff. I don't know, and I want to have plenty of time because just like stuff that we had a meeting on last week, I went over it and had with a fine-tooth comb, which I actually thought I did last week on this stuff, but then I found stuff again that was more applicable that I would have liked to have brought up at the meeting.
Sure.
So, I don't know. Maybe it's just my own personal self, but I want to get this right. And these evaluation, I think it's even the older board directors have had trouble with these evaluations and how to do it. And we've brought in, not when I've been here, but I think in the past they brought in, help from WASD and stuff to do it. So I'd like to, I don't know. And I apologize for taking up so much time.
Well, Director Hamada, what I hear you saying is that we need to answer some of your questions, provide some professional development, or maybe some opportunities for us to learn a little bit more about the process for those who may have more questions than others. And speaking of questions, I see that Director Venkatasalam has her hand up, and I'll give you the floor. Director Venkatasalam.
Yes, I think well, I just wanted to say I understand Director Hamada's concerns. It's valid, and I think it was a really good example, Dr. Watts, that you brought up. One of the suggestions I have is that we do have opportunities coming up in June when Dr. Watts does present his evaluation presentation. We do have an opportunity at that point to ask questions and set some parameters for the upcoming school year. I mean, there's always that opportunity to say we want to see some changes, or we think things are going well in this area. And I think that sort of sets the tone for what's to come, because he gets a very good understanding of where we want to see the district moving. So I think June is a critical time. And I do want to point out that we are saying that with the intent of setting SMART achievable goals by July 1st, that's not always going to be comprehensive, and we're not going to be done and approving this until the fall, because we don't have regular board meetings in July anyway. So when will we approve all of this? It would have to be after the start of school. So we do have an opportunity during the summer to really work through the goals we want to see that we might have unofficially set through a discussion with Dr. Watts during June.
Yeah.
And
And
that
we have
is
scheduled for June 2nd. Yeah, so his evaluation report is June 2nd. So we've got some time, you know what I mean, to do some more work there too.
That's very helpful that we don't have to have this in place until the fall. That helps me a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, feedbacks, or noticings or wonderings for goal 1, evaluation and metrics monitoring? Just reading the room, and I see None?
Nope.
Hearing none?
Whoa, sorry, I
Okay.
was muted. Do we not have to say something differently than set by July 1 then on our goals?
What would you tell me or share with the team? What suggestions or thoughts do you have?
Well, they're not written, formalized like we have until the fall to formalize them. But when you're saying set, that kind of, to me, that word means you've got what you want to do. To me, it would be new goals were discussed and drafted and will be finalized in the fall. I don't know. It doesn't show an accurate timeline to me. The way
It is again saying the intent of setting goals by July 1st. We can set the goals. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be approved by July 1st. I mean, that is a whole other process, right? That has to take place later. But if the evaluation is early June, there's no reason why we couldn't set it by July 1st, because we're going to have a robust discussion around evaluation in June. So, I mean, in my view, when we say with the intent of setting goals by July 1st, doesn't necessarily mean it has to be finalized.
And sometimes we do. Some of them, like we don't have the metrics, for example, graduation rates, right? We know we won't have those metrics until the summer. So some of them we can set, right? It just depends on when we have the metrics to evaluate the goals as well. But I think you're right. I think that's where the intent is in there, because some of them can be set by that time. So after he does his evaluation presentation on June 2nd, we typically would have a meeting after that to then begin discussing the new goals and that. And so, but I know that all of them are not set, but yeah, I mean, that was kind of the goal. And again, these are our board goals. So when we redo our board goals, for example, we've got the work session on the 23rd to redo these for us. We could change that language, if you know what I mean, to make it a little bit more clear.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because we've got to redo ours as well. So this has to be redone. So
Right.
yeah, we can fix that to make it better.
Thank you for the clarifying remarks and comments, President Daniels, Director Amata. Thank you, Director Vengadaslam. Any other feedback for item 1 before we move forward to communication plan? Okay, hearing none. Communication plan goal 2, the one item that is listed is to review and update, we'll call it an expectation, review and update 2018-2019 communication plan by the end of the calendar year. And I think we know obviously what we've been able to accomplish most recently, but I'll open it up for comments, commentary, noticings, wonderings.
So I might have gotten confused on this one because we approved these goals, I think in late September, October 14th. So I thought that we were supposed to have the communication plan updated by the end of the calendar year 2020, not 2021. So essentially we missed that. I mean, we're still working on it, but we did
Correct.
miss this one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Vice President Benjer. That's
Thank you.
exactly.
Yeah. So while we continue to work on it, we did,
Right.
we've got to be honest about it that we missed this
We
one.
missed that, right? Yeah.
Any other feedback or questions?
Well, here's the top of this document says 2021. We're not through 2021 yet. Is the calendar year 20 or is the calendar 2021 in our document? So,
School year.
right, but 2021,
No. When we set this goal, our intent was to do it by the end of the calendar year because we were behind on it. So when we
right,
set that one, we were supposed to have it done by December of 2020. That's
right,
why we put calendar year in there.
right. But it was because our director of communications had enough things on her plate to do before we could actually go forward with that, right?
Well,
I think there are probably a lot of things
Yeah.
happening with going back to
Correct.
school, trying to figure out,
Correct.
remote versus, I mean, there was a lot happening. And so I wouldn't necessarily say it was one person's issue. I think that it was just kind of the way that other updates and things that we needed to do that got added with regards to return to, remote learning and all of those things and hybrid. And so I think it just got, other things took precedence is what I think happened.
I do appreciate the, again, the noticings and wonderings. And I will say one that we haven't discussed that, and I think we did talk about this, but it's hard to truly understand what it means to enter a new role or new position. And remember, it was really our first year as a new team. Anytime you have a new complement of board members, whether it's one or all five, you have a new team. And so I do believe that just that part of that norming, storming, and then performing stages that we've had to go through and we've managed to go through in some areas, and we're still doing that in others, which is a natural part of improving our teamwork. So I would certainly agree, while we may not have met that goal in terms of a timeline, there were certain clear factors that were associated as to the why. I don't want to necessarily say that's an excuse, just a reason. Now that we are moving forward, I think we'll keep that deadline in mind and know that what we have to do and by when for the upcoming year.
And we set the calendar, Leslie and I set the calendar, and we didn't even add it to the calendar.
Understood.
So the communication plan update is not anywhere on the calendar that we set.
Right. So as I mentioned, there are several factors, and I think part of our teamwork is making sure we identify those and continuously improve. What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to start doing differently? I appreciate that.
But help me to understand, if the major part of the communication plan is done by a communication director, why does that fall under our board goals?
What's part of?
This is the board's communication.
Yeah, it's not her. Yeah, it's the board's communication plan. So for example, when we had scheduled in the previous year, we had town halls, right? We've had other things. It's the board communication plan. It's not, she helps us with it, but it's not her communication plan. It is ours. So we had newsletters. So previously we had newsletters. And so we would send information in for newsletters. So all of that was a part of things that we did prior to the COVID time. So it is our communication plan.
Listening sessions were another example,
Right.
that were part of the communication plan. And as we know, when pandemic hit, some of that changed, but I would also say other factors were the fact that we had a new board, we were learning and still are. But this is the conversation that we're having that's most important. So we can identify what needs to be changed going forward. How do we continuously improve? So I appreciate that.
Where do I find the 2018-2019 board communication plan, the board communication plan then? I don't think I have a file of that.
Well, that's what we just went over.
That was last week's work session.
Yeah.
That's correct.
That's what just happened. Yeah.
That was the communication plan for the whole district, right?
No, that's the
That was the
board
board.
communication plan.
So the district communication plan that we went through in a whole meeting is also the very same plan as the board communication plan.
No.
No, we looked at the board communication plan last week.
Oh, where is it?
So
Melissa
Sally
sent
shared
the
it.
link.
Yes,
Yeah,
you should have
Sally
that.
shared it as well.
Yeah, we've sent it several times.
Right. Yeah, it's in your email
And it's also on the SharePoint.
and
I
it's on the
believe.
OneDrive, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've looked at SharePoint. I asked Melissa for it, and so I could make corrections to it. And I got a link to the communication plan for the whole district from Karen. So I'm confused.
Okay. Well,
So
Dr. Mount, we can
I'm
certainly
not sure why. Yeah.
help you with that at maybe right after the meeting or before our next.
Okay, I appreciate that.
If you have, it would be helpful if just to know the specific communications we're talking about, the actual board communications plan.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we need to, indicate that. It's the board communication.
Well, it says that in OneDrive.
It
It
doesn't
says
say
board
that in the
communications plan.
document. In this document
yeah.
on our board goals, it doesn't say goal 2.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So
Yes,
instead of
that's
when
what
it says update
right.
2018-19, it should say board communication plan.
Correct.
I see what you're
No.
saying.
That's
That's
On
the
the
whole goal.
On the
Mhm.
goal. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I thought you were talking about the document that was shared.
I know we talked about this last week. Do we have other, because we didn't finish discussing it. Do we have future dates that we're planning to work on this? Do we have future work sessions planned for that?
we should. I have not committed those to memory. I know that we can certainly add those to the time that we have, relatively speaking, for this year. I'll need to double check that with Karen and Naomi. If we
Yeah,
do
we don't
not,
have
then
it on our
obviously we'll need to.
calendar.
Right. If we don't, we'll need to schedule them.
Yeah, but we have work sessions that are reserved, I think. so we
Correct.
can, Yeah. do
Right.
that.
But everyone got the link from Miss
Ms.
Larman
Howell, yeah,
to submit any of our changes for the
correct.
board plan, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, everyone got that?
I did not get that.
Yeah, I don't know
Okay.
what you are referring to, actually.
Wasn't
I
it
thought-
in the weekly update?
Correct. And I thought I heard you say you
Yeah.
did see that.
Yeah.
Director
Yeah, she
Hamada.
has a file that was attached to the
Yes.
weekly
Yeah,
report
weekly
afterwards.
Yes,
Yeah.
I saw that. Thank you. Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't know that. Yes, it was. I did
That's-
see the update. Yes.
No
thank you.
worries. And that, please, context is everything. So this is the reason why we're having this meeting. But take a look if you have not.
If it's in there, I did not look in, I didn't notice that. That's absolutely, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
welcome.
So I do have a question on that. I was also looking for it during our last meeting, and Karen sent it through SharePoint. And I'm wondering, there was a time when it was on our school board website. I'm wondering why it disappeared from the website. And couldn't it be on there even though it's dated and we're working on it? At least, there's some context for the public to see.
So what I'm hearing, Director Vengadaslam, if it's not, and I have not seen that portion of the school board director's website or page, you're asking, can it be added to that page, or at least forward facing on the board webpage? Is that correct?
Yeah, it used to
If it's
be
not-
there on the
yeah.
board webpage. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I guess because it's outdated.
Dr. Watts, I can,
I'll check. I was going to say I'll work with Melissa. Thank you, Melissa.
Director Vengadaslam, President Daniels, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Halley. Just to provide context, we have a standard of 2 years if a web page isn't updated to retire the web page. So when we hit that mark, we retired the web page. So that is why. That is the reason. So we could add content when it's revised, or we could add content to say that the board's revisiting this and that it's part of the 2021 goals, which would in fact make the board fresh again and up to date, and link it to the work session. But because it just fell within the standards of keeping our board, our entire website fresh. So we try to, any page that's not updated within a 2-year time frame, we retire those pages. So we don't end up with thousands of pages that are out of date.
Mhm.
Thank you. That makes sense. And I like your idea of linking it to the work session, because then we all have context. This is what we discussed to update, and we don't have to search 3 different places.
Sure. I have staff that are out of office, so if you can give me till the end of the week, and we can make that happen.
That's great. Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, if there are no other questions, comments, or wonderings about Goal 2, communication plan, specifically board communication plan, we can move to Goal 3, policy review. Policy review within the annual board goals document supports 3 fundamental aspects. 1, to have a work session on a monthly basis to review policy. 2, to add staff timeline on policy adoption. So that would also include procedural expectations as well. And 3, add WASDA timeline to board calendar. I'll open it up for discussion.
This is another one. I think we've missed some of it. I know September 12th, October 7th, November 21st, we had work sessions, and I know we've had a couple other recent policy work sessions, but again, I think we've fallen short based on timeline. I think we didn't intend to do December, honestly, but I think we missed a month in there in January, February, March timeline. But I think we've made a concerted effort to make it a focus.
So we actually did make January.
Okay. I think the
So I think
6th
we've
or
only
something.
missed like one. Yeah, I think we've only missed really.
Yeah,
like
I think
one.
we've missed February or March, but I think we've done pretty well. I think Dr. Harmon has done a good job of keeping us on task with this one.
We did it February 3rd. So we've
yeah.
been on it. We've been doing it.
Yeah.
So the calendar, it's on there. It's just we did miss one, I think. But
yeah. So I've been grateful to Dr. Harmon for keeping us on track.
She does a great
with
job
this goal.
That's part of the work, and I appreciate her commitment, and most importantly, to creating a space where our board can work on achieving one of your primary goals and duties and responsibilities. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything else regarding the other items? I heard Director Hamada mentioning WASDA in their insertion into this process.
Yeah, I'm not sure we've done that. Have we put WASDA timeline to our board calendar?
So what we have on there are policy updates.
Right.
That WASDA.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if that's, were you going to say something else?
That was part of it. The timeline certainly is part of the work. Whenever there's model policy that comes out, the goal would be ideally that we would bring those model policies to a board policy session. But also we've done, and I think it was Director Amata who had mentioned partnering with WASDA in the past. We have had WASDA staff come to board sessions to facilitate work as well. And so just wanted to offer that as an opportunity. And I didn't know if that's something that you were also considering.
So I did want to add, this particular piece also had to do with when WASDA was refreshing our policies, and they had a specific timeline, when they could finish a series. And that was something that Dr. Harmon presented at a school board meeting. And we had agreed to put that on the board calendar because that would dictate when staff and board would do our work. But I don't think, are we back to WASDA helping us? We have done with that work, right?
Yeah, we've not included them in any recent, as of this past year, obviously.
So, that's a discussion as well. Do we want to continue that? There is a financial commitment there. It's not a whole lot, but do we want them to keep all of these things updated for our CWs? And those are things that the district may not have the time or the expertise. So that was a question that came up.
Will they update their policies? So are you asking if we want to have them, once they get the updates, then to have them update ours? Because the way it's been working is, so Jill would say, okay, well, WASDA just updated this policy, so that's why it's up for us for review. So are you
But
asking whether?
have we had them review all of our policies? Because that was
They did that a couple
kind
years
of-
ago, right? Wasn't that
Yeah,
what
they
we
have.
paid
Not-
for them to do?
That I'd have to confer with
Yeah.
Dr. Harmon. I certainly don't believe all of our policies have been reviewed by WASDA, but we do monitor and just as we've discussed, when model policies become available, that's been our
Yeah.
process to bring those to the board.
So it's that updating, that was the reason we added WASDA timeline is initially, yes, they had a timeline that we had to go by
Mhm.
to review all of our policies. So that is a question, Dr. Watts, if you could find out.
I think we can
are
clarify that.
done? Yeah,
Yes.
are we done reviewing, or is WASDA done reviewing all the policies?
Yeah.
So based on the information that I do have, as it stands, each of the 6 series thus far, WASDA has completed those series now, and I'll say that if there's additional information, I will let you know, but that is the most current information. So we can talk about what that means for us from our timeline and board calendar, but I believe our safe next steps and safe bet will be to follow model policy once, anytime it is updated by WASDA, but I'll make sure that's confirmed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And I also just don't want it to slip through the cracks too. Just last week's conversation from the recommendation from the equity committee that we start a 0 series for other things like that.
Yes. For
Like
strategic.
for strategic
Yes.
goals.
Yes.
So just I want to make sure that that stays front of mind because I think it's a good idea.
Thank you, Vice President Bettinger. The 0,000 series is a concept and a comment and commentary that we've socialized for the last couple of years or so, and believe it is time, given our current work, particularly with our race and equity policy, the strategy that really helps us with the how, right, and how we do this work. So thank you for that reminder. If there are no other questions regarding goal 3 and policy review, hearing none, and we are on time, about 12 minutes before our first hour, if you will, to suspend on annual board goals before we transition to resolution.
And
So let's go to goal 4. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, no,
Yes,
we are not
Director
done
Bennett.
goal 4. I thought we were finishing up this section. My bad.
We are. Yes, yes. So moving from goal 3 to goal 4, an annual calendar. Board annual agenda plan, and I'll just, as you can review, is a fluid document that currently includes presentations, reports, resolutions, general operating business, and recognitions, in which case could be special meetings, superintendent evaluation dates, budget evaluation dates, school closures for holidays and breaks, and graduations. The annual calendar will be established before the school year begins, sometime typically in July, August.
So this is typically done by the board president and vice president. So we get together and then go through the calendar, and then we come back to the whole board and we work through it,
Yes.
and confirm everything. So
Yeah. So we'll find a time to meet
yeah.
in late May, early June.
That's right.
Yeah, June will probably be, somewhere
Yeah.
early June will probably be best for me.
And point of clarification, would we want to have any ideas that any director has to put on that calendar, to put that forth before you start designing that calendar? Would that be the?
So typically it happens when we have the meeting. So when we present it to the board, if there's things that board directors want to add, we can add it at that time. We just
Okay.
kind of go by the things that we have to have, like there's certain things on the calendar that have to happen, right? So we typically, just like we did, we put all the have to haves on there and leave extra work session space and all of that to be filled by board director requests and such.
And that would be when the whole board comes together, not before.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
I just want to see the process. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Thank
it's
you,
only
President
two of us, of course, because, you know, the open public meetings thing. So
Right.
that's why we kind of do the skeleton of it and then bring it to the board.
Thank you for that clarity, President Daniels, and the clarifying questions as well, Director Hamada. If there's no other questions regarding annual calendar? Hearing none. If we're ready to move to,
Before we move on, I had a question. I know that
Please.
there's going to be a meeting coming up about goals for the board. I just want to put it out in the universe that I think that our board goals really should have some stuff about equity on here somewhere. There's the word equity is not on here at all. I really think that there needs to be something. So for whatever we do in the future, I want to put in the universe that something about equity needs to be on here. I feel like that's missing. I know it's kind of embedded in some of this work that we do. I like to see it like out there saying that we're going to work on equity. We're going to do important work of the district. So I don't know when that will be. I guess
June
that's the
23rd.
question.
June 23rd
that's our next. Thank
is
you.
our next, is our,
Thank you so much.
absolutely.
So noted that, Director Benno, that the work that we are going to engage in should continue to be explicit and called out with regard to our core values, first among equals being equity. And we'll look forward to that continued work as a board, superintendent governance team as well. Thank you. Are there any other noticings, wonderings, or questions? If not, please the board, we will move to resolution number 1600, the revised protocol guidelines.
Mhm.
This is a 2-page document I have for essentially 1 1/8 of a document here for our review.
So there were some concerns, I believe, when we went to pass this in the board meeting about a couple of the points. And I know Vice President Bettinger, you had mentioned a couple of things. So do you remember?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So number 13, which is the agenda process. So my question about this is, I know we have the process and we have the form. In my experience, it's catch as catch can. You know, just even, I can't remember. Now I'm trying to remember. Oh, trying to get the board communication plan on the agenda. I submitted a form 3 times, and you know, starting in early December, and it never got a response. So, you know, I just think because we're doing the board, you know, we were elected oversight and doing the community's work as a board. So when we have a board meeting, we are conducting the community's work. Essentially, we represent them. We represent the taxpayers and our constituents. I just want to add some. I think that as our job representing the community, that we should be able to add something to the agenda at a meeting if it is something crucial and important. And I personally would respect a board director who felt something was crucial and important to add to a meeting. So I just have concerns. I had concerns about that one. And so my recommendation for this is, you know, we agree to follow the agenda process to ask the board president or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda, you know, whenever possible, as a first as a first step or whenever possible, but it is allowed to bring up an agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. We do have an agenda review process. It's a standing item.
I think the only challenge with that is that sometimes the things that are brought up, people don't have the time to actually be able to respond in that time.
Mhm,
If something's brought up right then, I think that's why we had the discussion about not to do that,
mhm.
because a lot of times people have to go back and get answers, or if everyone doesn't have the information to be able to contribute to the discussion. I think that's why we decided to do it that way, because many of the things that are brought up, honestly, most of the time there's some other information that's needed or some other research that has to happen so we can, discuss it intelligently and thoroughly. So I think that's why, because we're also putting the staff kind of on the spot at times. If it's something that's, that they may have to respond to, it doesn't give them the time to be able to respond to it either.
Yeah, and certainly my intent with bringing this up is not to put anyone on the spot ever.
Yeah.
But I do think that sometimes there are items in the past that have, I've tried. Let's face it, being completely honest, it took a year to get something on the agenda. And that's why we had that odd meta conversation about how to get something on the agenda. And so I don't agree with number 13, not allowing a board director to bring something up, to put it on to at least put it forth for discussion. And then the board has the opportunity to question the addition of the item and then can vote then and there to put it on the agenda or not. I feel pretty strongly about it.
Okay, I'm a little confused because I thought we said in the previous meeting that we were going to adjust the statement based on our process of completing that form.
Mm-hmm.
So did we not say that we would follow the agenda process to ask the board president, but we also said by submitting the form.
Right.
So
And
I
think
know your case is that your argument
Well,
is that it didn't happen.
for one issue though, right? Because in reality, I mean, I've approved agenda items. So I'm not sure. I think that December one happened during the transition of
And then
presidency.
and I sent it 2 times out. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I'm just saying, I don't exactly recall that, but I do know you've sent other agenda items and they've been placed on the agenda. So I'm not sure what happened with that one, or maybe I'm not exactly sure what happened with that one. But it sounds like that happened to the one agenda item you requested, but other agenda items you've requested have gone through.
So this year I've only requested 2 agenda items. That one
Okay.
about the communication plan I sent in December. Then there was a crossover and I sent it twice afterwards and it was never acknowledged. And the one other item I did send, yes, that was approved right away. But I just think that, based on my experience and our roles to evaluate and oversee and things like that, again, I still think the board it should not be common practice. It shouldn't happen every board meeting. But I do strongly believe that board directors, if something comes up that they feel is important to discuss at that particular meeting based on whatever potentially might be going on, I think any of my colleagues should have the opportunity to add something. I don't want to see it as a standard practice, but I do want to see it as an option.
And I might want to add that I've asked for 2 board agenda items, and I have given grace on those 2 board, and they were approved, but they've never been brought up. And I have been giving grace. So I think if we're going to be true to this protocol, and I believe that I would want to try to any protocol not be a check the box, that I actually adhere to it, I listen to it, and I agree with my colleagues. That that could be an issue. I don't see why it has to be on there exactly either. And I think some of this accountability on here, I've read through this again. And again, the more I read through this stuff, the more it in my mind, things come up. And I'm thinking a lot of these protocol guidelines, you know, some of them are saying, you know, that they're going to happen, but there's no timeline. Or what do we measure as an acceptable timeline? I don't see when you're saying like they're encouraged to bring their issue, but there's no actual accountability on the timelines on this. And I don't know, maybe you don't want this to be accountable exactly. It's just kind of in general, but I have an issue with that. Like, you know, some of this, when if we agree to all these, that the superintendent takes care of it, which I think is his job. What is an acceptable amount of time to have an answer to this stuff? And I do try to give grace, but sometimes things go on, and I've now started a file to go back, and if things are not answered, to go back and reissue again. But I'm wondering if we can't talk about timelines a little bit and what we feel is acceptable as a timeline.
Well, I think that can vary, right, depending on what the situation is and who has to respond to it and all of those pieces. So maybe setting a timeline for an initial response. Is that what you're talking about? Because some of these things might take, right? You might have to send it to other departments to get answers or things like that. And so, but maybe an initial response, maybe, or something, or acknowledgement of something.
Well, sometimes I'll get an acknowledgement, but then again, for instance, a constituent had a question for me, and I let it go by for a whole month, giving grace because I understood we had time for, we had some time off there for the kids who were out of school. And I went back to my file and I saw, hey, I dropped the ball on this, and now the constituent is asking me again about this. And I'm trying to follow the chain of command and all that. But I'm wondering if we can't, you know, and I'm not trying to make this unreasonable, because I do think a lot of this falls, you know, if we're continually falling with operations and procedures and stuff to our superintendent. I get that things can happen, but I just don't, I think sometimes things fall through the cracks, and I just would like to see just a little bit more understanding on how long do we let this go on before, you know. I actually got an answer to my question because I went directly to the person, and I wasn't real comfortable doing that because I was waiting and waiting for an answer, you know. And if I want to adhere to protocol guidelines, I can't just be checking the box. It has to be something that I put into action.
I
May I
appreciate the
ask if-
comments. Yes, I was just wondering, which are we still focusing on? 13 or?
No, I'm not. I mean, okay. I'm looking like under number, let's see what I wrote on here. It would be number, I guess it was number 5. While the board is eager to listen to its constituents and staff, each inquiry is to be referred to the person who can properly and expeditiously address the issue. We agree to follow the chain of command in accordance with established board policy and procedure. And I mean, I want to agree to that. I want to live that. But I also, when people say, hey, you dropped the ball, you were going to get back to me, and I've answered and said, I'm waiting for an answer. I've already given that answer initially, and I don't get an answer. So, you know, I got an answer when I went directly to the person, but then, you know, I'm not following protocol guidelines.
No, I appreciate certainly what you're saying.
I'm not trying to put blame on anybody.
No, I don't sense that, nor take that personally. I would say personal responsibility. And the reality is that I don't know which situation, and we can certainly talk about that you know, at another time. But there are certainly factors that are associated, and sometimes some situations are more complex than others, as President Daniels mentioned. But the reality is, and sometimes it it's okay if you need to double check, whether it's with me or with Ms. Halley or Ms. Santello. Those are the options that we would have, and it doesn't. I just want you to know our intent is never to purposefully fail to respond or not give you the information that you're seeking. So we want to make sure that it's good to hear this, certainly, and we'll continue to refine our processes. But I also want you to know that you can continue asking, and there's at least 3 people between me and Karen and Ms. Santello who should be able to follow up or provide you with updates hopefully as soon as possible.
Right. I mean, and I have followed that, and I actually did follow up to see if, and I waited another 10 days and I still didn't get an answer. So then I just said, I'm going to forget about this if I don't look into it and find an answer, because I will forget about it. And
Right.
so, I just think open-ended things like that
Sure.
can create issues. And I do think we somehow or other need to have, I don't know, some type of more of a manageable timeline here that we can fall back on. So I can say, so if you want me to follow this, I'll follow it, but it has to make sense. That's all.
I appreciate that. I trust that 10 days is the exception rather than the rule. At the same time, we don't want that to be the case for anyone who's seeking answers to questions. And I do appreciate you sharing that.
And I would say the same thing like with the agenda request, because I'm looking back to see, and I have I have one that was sent from you in particular, Vice President Bettinger, on the 6th of January. And that's the only one that I have, and that was fulfilled. So, but if for some reason I miss it or someone misses it, it's always an option to say, hey, I sent this to you, can you follow up on it? Because I mean, honestly, and I know, Director Amada knows when she was president and Director Vingadaslam, you get at times hundreds of emails. And so, weeding through them. So it's not unusual. Something might slip through the cracks. So, but if you definitely follow up and just say, hey, I sent this to you. Can you, just to kind of re-put it, because things do get missed at times, right? We're human. And so, but that would be helpful too, because I want to be held accountable as well. So I think that's something that, we should be able to hold each other accountable as well.
Yeah,
I
I wanted a second, just for clarification. I'm sorry, I interrupted. But for clarification, I sent them with like probably before a board meeting, just saying with my questions to the board meeting. I think I put it in the narrative there and attached it to my questions for a board meeting. And I addressed both you and Dr. Watts is how I recall doing that. So if that's not a good way to do it, then I can do it a different way as well.
Well, the way you did it on the 6th worked well. So I that's the only one that I have. So if there was something that, like I said, and things get missed, so that worked fine. So, but again, if for some reason I don't respond within a couple of days, or just don't hesitate to say, hey, Denise, I sent you this, pay attention to it.
Thank you.
So that's perfectly fine. And I would hope any of us would be open for that reminder and that, because again, things do get, missed at times. And so absolutely.
Yeah, I did want to say, going back to, I guess, what was it, number 3 or 4 that we just discussed? I can't see up on top. When we're talking about constituent concerns, number 5, sorry. I do wonder about thought exchange, and if we've looked at an area that can sort of compile board questions that need follow-up. So some sort of a process or project management, an area where we can ask questions and somebody we know is assigned or is following up on those, so that we know it's at least been viewed by someone and is being taken care of. Because this has been an ongoing thing. It's not just this administration, or I just know from every year this comes up with board members. And a lot of it has to do with time. And I have to say, Dr. Watson team have responded much more thorough fashion than many years in the past. But it's typical that we see this every year. So I'm wondering if we can kind of be more creative and use some of our tools like Thought Exchange or someplace where we can see all of the questions that are building. I mean, that would help us as board members to kind of see what others are hearing, you know, because I don't necessarily know what everybody's hearing, but I get questions too that you're not aware of. So anyway, I'm just wondering if we can put our mind to work on that. This is an age-old question, concern that we really haven't found a solution.
No, I appreciate that comment, Director Vengadaslam. And one of the challenges that we will all face is that the need has always been there. The need for information, the need to answer a question when you have a problem that you need to solve. And what has changed, however, is the amount of or the types of communication platforms where that information comes to us. So, at one point there was, person-to-person communication, right? A conversation was really the most viable means. Then writing a letter, then email, then social media and discussion boards, and so all of that does play a role. So I would hope that we can fine-tune that to the extent that we can, but I think it would be a challenge to find a way to capture every comment, and we monitor, all of our major social media platforms, and we do respond to questions that are.
So
Yeah.
Dr. Watts, I guess I'm asking an area for the board, not board as a
Thought exchange.
conduit,
Got it.
But so I understand we collect from constituents regularly. Right. But if people are coming to the board and the board is waiting for answers, at least it's somewhere on the radar of, up on the top is a priority. When it reaches the board, sometimes it's more of the urgent issues.
Sure.
And sometimes not, because they know a board member, they feel like they can get an answer before others,
Sure.
So that happens too. But I think the issue we're facing right now is board members saying that we have questions that are not getting answered, and there could be a number of reasons why, and it would help us to know what the what the reason is that we're not getting a response.
Okay.
And it could be time, it could be you have to do other research. That happens quite a bit. Sure. At least we know that you're working on it.
Sure.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Look, I'm just wondering, like, for me, it's more like a customer service thing. And I don't know what, I know in my nonprofit I work with, we use like Zen Help Desk for like incoming email that we can organize into solved, unsolved, etc. As a creative solution, like I don't know what we use in the district for customer service, like help desk or technology services or whatnot. But having something like that for our inboxes, I think could help us make sure that we get to everything so we don't miss anything, because we can mark things as solved, unsolved, and sort, and then go back and look at some of these things. It would be a creative solution, at least to figure out our inboxes, to make sure that we are fulfilling number 5, where we're listening and responding to constituents and referring things that we don't answer, and deferring that to the president to answer on behalf of the board. So I think that's a creative solution we can look at, but I don't know. I know we use a lot of platforms. I just don't know if we use that specific tech resource in our district.
Yeah, some sort of a project management tool that tells us that this is solved, not solved. Yes, I agree.
Okay, I'm taking note of that, and certainly we'll follow up with our communications team and see if there are some viable solutions, something that we're either not doing or perhaps we can do in a different way. Okay.
And we have to consider the Open Public Meeting Act too. So it would have to be done somewhat publicly, like the question would have to be, if it's not a violation of FERPA or employment law, things like that, it would have to, it would, have to be something that was, available to anyone, to the public as well, which I know on the website before, questions got asked from the community conversations and the answers were posted. So for a short time, there was something like that. And maybe even that, reviving that, where it's like if a board director gets a question and they know the rest of the board didn't get that question, that they could forward it to someone to, post on the website for an answer.
So just thinking about this, I mean, and I've seen this kind of happen at times. I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that at times, let's say there's 5 of us and each of us sends in 5 questions. I mean, that can be, and are requesting answers to 5 questions. I mean, it can be a bit, it could be a bit of a workload issue because, and that's not unreasonable. I mean, sometimes board members have multiple questions, right? And we get multiple questions. And so I think we need to be cognizant of the workload aspect of that as well. Because typically, like I said, and I know we talk about like the board president responds to the initial emails, and I do respond to every email that I get. And so, but you guys don't necessarily, I mean, I guess you just trust that I respond because I can't copy you in all of it, right? And that's kind of the board president responsibility. And so it might be, I'm just wondering about all of the board members bombarding, asking for questions to be posted on. I mean, I think I could see that getting out of hand and being a lot. So I don't know how to manage that best, because again, there are times when we get hundreds of questions. I mean, there's, and so depending on what time of the year we're in and what's happening. And so I think we need to figure out how to manage that reasonably for staff, to think about the workload on staff and what that looks like.
I do think we need to kind of consider our communication plan and what goes in there. So if that's something, if we're having community sessions, I guess I'm wondering, how would this be different? People are not attending a session, community conversation, but they're asking by phone or by email. So I don't see the difference of posting questions that come to a board member via phone or email versus a community conversation.
Well, it
so,
is different.
I mean,
yeah, because it happened 3 times, right? Throughout the year versus every day, potentially, and every week. I mean, there were set times.
But I'm wondering if we're going to get questions every day that all 5 of us are going to be posting. So I do feel like if there are critical questions that we can't answer, we don't have the answer to the question, we ought to be able to ask that, and other board members ought to be able to see that. And I think having a place to go where it is being monitored or somebody's seeing it, and we either can or cannot give an answer. So that could be, that's a response. This is violating FERPA. We can't respond to this. I do think it's really important to have that sort of we had that, and we talked about reinstating that when there's community conversations.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm not really seeing the difference, when questions do come. I don't feel like every day all 5 of us are going to have questions.
No, but it's happened. I think I wonder about setting a standard, though. If we say that that's what's going to happen, so at that time when it does happen, then we'd still have to respond in the same way. But I totally agree with you. But the thing about our community conversations is we each wrote down our questions from our conversations. We sent them to Melissa, and she condensed them because a lot of the questions were similar. So it is different. And so I think if they're coming from, because I mean, I get questions like, and also I think we need to define what are the questions we'd be posting answers to. because sometimes we get questions about personal issues, right? And sometimes we get questions about things specific to a school. And sometimes, so I think trying to figure out how we can weed through and determine which questions are most important to be posted, because we can't post every single question that we get. That just wouldn't be reasonable.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Again, the dialogue is fascinating, and a reminder of just how complex our work is. I want to remind us as well of the protocol guidelines. We were focusing much of our comments and thought process on protocol guideline number 5. And what comes to mind as I'm listening to our dialogue is the next protocol guideline, which is 6. And so the board will encourage stakeholders and community members to present their own issues, problems, or proposals. Now, that does not mean every time or in every way, but I think what we have to remember that one common thread through all of our discussions is context matters. And so depending on the issue, the board, staff, members of Team KSD in general also have the right and responsibility to encourage community members, family members, constituents, however we choose to describe our relationship with our community. The goal is to solve the problem at the most direct level, ideally. And I've used this example before. I drive a Ford Focus. If my brakes are failing, I might feel like it makes sense for me to go to the Ford company and ask to speak to the CEO or to the board of directors because my car is not working. But they're going to say, the best place to go is to go to the auto shop down the street and they can fix your brakes for you. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that's every issue, but that's part of the process that we as leaders have to determine. What's the best course of action? Because I know sometimes we always want to solve everyone's problems. As leaders, that's part of our core, right? We are servant leaders. But we also know that could take more time and not get us any closer to the solution that we need to. So I'm not saying that has to happen every time, but I do think that is a point for us to consider. Putting emails on a website, for example, would certainly take a great deal of some staff members' time. So I just want to bring that up for context.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I forget that sometimes, but right, there are questions like when people have questions about schedules or bus or things like that, then to direct them back to the principal, their building principal, or the people who could most answer that question best.
Yeah, and I do think sometimes we generalize, and so I know that specifically when there are questions that principals can't answer, that has to do with, say, transfer or something like that. Yes, they could go to somebody at the district, but I don't know necessarily who's handling that. So I would go to Dr. Watts and copy Karen. So there are things that, we can't say, just go to your principal. So I think we know enough to make that decision. And so those are the questions I'm wondering about, like, how do we handle those big issues that, they just can't get a response from anybody and they don't know who to turn to. I know we had Let's Talk, or is it Let's Talk? Yeah. That program that was supposed to handle go to the right party, didn't work. But that problem still, still exists. Like, who do we turn to for some of these questions? And in my view, some of these questions, if they're coming to all the board members, I mean, it would start a frequently asked questions. That's a way to gather that kind of information that can be answered for everybody. So I don't know, are we doing that on Thought Exchange, kind of looking at what are the same questions that are arising? And do we have one response or a few responses to those? I mean, we should be doing some sort of analysis there as well.
Thank you, Director Megadosma.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to the customer service, kind of to echo what Director Benno said and what Director Vengadaslam said, I always, I guess if someone, just in business in general, when I've had different jobs, if someone asks a question more than once, I feel like that is something that I would put in an FAQ, and I would create an FAQ. And I've done that in many different roles and jobs, because if one person's asking it, I think, oh, it might be a one-off. But if once two people ask it, I always think there's probably more people out there that have the question. So I would echo that. I would like to also see something resolved, and I think when we get, focusing back on the protocol guidelines, on number 5, the word expeditiously is the one that is started this whole discussion. And I think it's been a valuable discussion. And so, I just, a lot of times the questions I do have are something that are deeper than, like, a lot of times if it's procedural, I just look on the website and then I just send them a link. If someone asks me a question, if I can find it on the website, I will. If I can find it on the website, in 5 to 10 minutes, that's how I will respond. But some of these other things, I think back to our listening sessions with the ombuds, and a lot of the situations there, they had questions, they had problems, they asked questions, they had problems, and things just went on and on and on. So, the situations were not handled expeditiously. And so if I'm going to agree to the word expeditiously in this, I want to know what our definition of expeditiously is as a group,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Board member comments?
How about putting to the highest degree possible? I don't know if that is diluting it, but there are times that it can't be expeditious.
Right. So you're suggesting that we would say, while the board is eager to listen to its constituents and staff, each inquiry is to be referred to the person who can properly address the issue to the highest level possible?
I mean, properly and most
And
efficiently, or I don't know.
I don't know if saying expeditiously to the highest degree possible is the
You
right
can properly
grammar.
address the issue in the most timely manner, or something like that. Should we say something like that?
But again, then what's our definition of timely? Because
I don't think you can put, but the thing is, again, like Director Vengadaslam said, you can't put a timeline on something that might take a lot more research than something that is a quick answer. So I think that's the difficult part. It depends on what the nature of the question is. But I definitely think the most timely, which means most quickly, or I don't know.
So I
That's
guess
what
I'm saying
expeditiously means,
to put who can properly and expeditiously to the highest degree possible address this issue in comma.
That makes sense.
to the highest degree possible.
Comma, address the issue.
So, and just to clarify the definition, I would say the operational definition of expeditiously is with speed and efficiency. Now, again, context matters. If it's more complex a concern or question is, by definition, it may take, not always, but it may take longer. So I do understand, and we've talked about operationalizing, and I know that there are business standards. We've tried to maintain, when we say 24 to 48 hours, that is a business standard. Depending on the scenario, sometimes that is easy to obtain, and sometimes it's harder. But expeditiously, by definition, speedily and efficiently.
Okay, since I'm taking notes, and I'll probably be doing the update. So while the board is eager to listen to its constituents and staff, each inquiry is to be referred to the person who can properly and expeditiously to the highest degree possible, comma, address the issue. We agree to follow the chain of command in accordance with established board policy and procedure.
Yes, there would be a comma before expeditiously and
After expeditiously, right?
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, after
Yeah, after
expeditiously.
After
and
expeditiously,
before.
yes, comma, to the highest degree possible, which is parenthetical,
Yes.
essentially, yes.
So getting back to number 13, do we want to put anything about the agenda form, or I thought that's what we were going to do?
We did. So follow the agenda process to ask the board president or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda instead of bringing it up unexpectedly at the meeting. But again,
But that's asking, completing the forms.
yeah, so I follow the agenda process to ask
Okay.
the form is implied, but again,
Yeah.
I just would like to just, and whenever, and I don't know how to add, I don't know what specific language to add other than, bringing it up on a, instead of bringing, okay. We agree to follow the agenda process to ask the board president or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda and only as a last resort to bring it up unexpectedly at the meeting.
I guess I just struggle with that because, like I said, I don't know. Most of the time things come up. I don't know that we have the information to be able to discuss it thoroughly. And again, if it requires a staff member response, I don't want them to be put on the spot. I don't think that's fair. I think as a staff member who's prepared to present at board meetings multiple times to get something else thrown at you can be a challenge. So I'm thinking about our staff and their ability to respond in a way that they're comfortable and they feel as though they'd be adequately able to. And I don't know that that would allow them to do that if it's something, which most of the things that come up it will need response from someone at the district most of the time.
I know just for me, it has always been my intent to let people know that I have a question or a concern and I want to discuss something. I have never, even things I've added to the agenda, I have always let the superintendent and board president know that I was going to add it to the agenda. That has been my policy, just personal. I don't ever want to surprise somebody with something. I want to always be clear in my intentions. So,
but
but
would that process surprise somebody? Isn't that what would exactly happen?
I have said before in an email to the board president and superintendent prior to your time as board president, I've said I'm going to be bringing this up at the board meeting and asking to add it as an agenda item. Case in point was that meta conversation about adding an item to the agenda. I feel very strongly that as board directors, we should have, this limits our ability to get something on the agenda. And it as board directors, if the agenda process isn't being followed for some reason, whatever reason, and I just would like to see language to the effect that we agree to follow the agenda process, but understand that there are times when a board director might add something to the agenda. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, supplemental personnel reports get added to the agenda and I don't get 3 days to look at them as per board policy. And I'm expected to sometimes make a judgment or a decision on something that I didn't get time to look at. So,
well, we only accept the person. We don't approve. That's not something. I mean, we accept the personnel reports. We don't approve employment, right? So it's just a procedure. So that's another. We wouldn't be discussing the personnel report. It's not something that would be up for us to have a discussion about.
And just in my time on the board too, there are many, many times where prior to a meeting, I don't see the materials until the meeting happens. And then So I feel like as a board director, that is exactly what happens. We're surprised. I don't feel like I often have time to really look at something. I didn't get 3 days in advance as per our board policy that's what we get to look at things. So, and as
But
I
it's on
said,
the agenda. These are things that are already on the agenda. So it is up for us to discuss anything that's on the agenda. So even if you didn't get it prior, we discuss it because it's on the agenda.
I can't say it strongly enough. Number 13 is very important that board directors have the opportunity as a last resort, if they feel that their concern isn't getting on the agenda or something that they feel passionately about that needs to be discussed doesn't get on the agenda, that it should be that as a last resort, and it's done few and far between, infrequently, but that it is an option to add something to the agenda if necessary. And again, someone can give me a presentation about something, but if I didn't see the materials in advance, I'm not prepared to discuss it or ask even sometimes even educated questions about it, because I just saw the materials, at that meeting. Sometimes we even see things at a meeting and then are expected to vote on it. We see it at a work session and we're expected to vote on it. So I believe it's a very similar situation. If in the rare occurrence that a board director feels passionately they want to get something on the agenda, of course it's best to follow the procedure and the process, but it should be open to a board director if there's something they're not being able to get on the agenda for whatever reason, that it goes to the whole board for a discussion, and the whole board then has the opportunity to either say, I don't have enough information, I don't even know, so I'm going to abstain from approving this, or until I get more information, or whatever. That gives every board director has the opportunity to either second it and get it on the agenda, or abstain and say they need more information. It's just another avenue for a board director.
Okay, so so I have a couple of questions. One is, what would prevent us from bringing up that agenda item during board discussion and reports at the end?
I have done that too.
Right.
I've said, I'm asking right now during my board discussion and report to get XYZ placed on the agenda, and it gets no acknowledgement.
Okay, so then the next thing would be to put in number 13 to say, in the rare event, and I know Director Bettinger, Vice President Bettinger, you don't think this is rare, but in the rare event, the agenda item is not discussed with the contributor, something to that effect. Then you have the right to bring that up at the meeting. So I think that holds everybody accountable. If you have presented the information and you haven't heard back from anyone, then you have the right to bring that up. That's just my suggestion.
So you would say, we agree to follow the agenda process to ask the board president or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda. In the rare event that that agenda item, I'm sorry, I can't remember what you said.
Request was not responded to or something like that. Then, because I think, and even you said a lot of your issues happened prior to us establishing a procedure, right? And prior to that actually happening.
So in the rare event that the request was not acknowledged or honored,
or I would say responded to, because also there are some things that may not be appropriate to go on the agenda at the time it was requested, right? Or something like that. So I think responded to is probably the best.
So we agree to follow the agenda process to ask the board president or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda instead of bringing it up unexpectedly at the meeting. In the rare event the request was not responded to, the board director may bring it up at the agenda review.
Agenda review, our meeting. So when we use
So
that
when
word,
we approve it at the very beginning,
at the very beginning,
when I ask if there's any additions, when I asked Dr. Watts, So and of course, we'll figure this out, but I just don't agree with that. I can see that going multiple different places when it's like, oh, we're gonna, I want to add this to the agenda to talk about today. And I just see it as, I don't see it as an appropriate. I mean, I think that, we need to be held accountable for the process is what I think. I think we need to be held accountable for the process.
That was going to be my question.
Right.
Is like we use the WASDA recommended parliamentary guideline, right, for our board meetings, right? And I'm the parliamentarian for my union, so I know Sturgis, I know Robert's rules, like I know those. I don't necessarily know the WASDA parliamentary procedure, so I don't know what the process is. I know that some processes are different than others. That's why I don't necessarily always love parliamentary procedure, because I think that there's some confusing stuff. But I guess that's my question: is like, what if it's not in our standing rules and it's not in these protocols, then it lives in the parliamentary guideline. So what does that say minus this? And is this actually needed? So I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I think these are, if I could, and just to clarify, there may be topics that are of interest that board members wish to bring to to the dais for discussion. And as a reminder, I know we often share this in our protocol. This is and most people who are not used to board meetings see a board meeting as a public meeting. And there is a difference between a public meeting and a business meeting held in the public. Right. And by a business meeting being held in the public, business meeting means that there are certain standards and protocols that would be brought forward. And if it's a business item that we would want to discuss, there is a process for that. Now, we can certainly talk about what various and what other topics could be brought forward. But I do want us to keep that in mind.
Right. So if a constituent brings something up, we wouldn't be discussing that in our business meeting. It's just, that's right, it is. And thank you for that, Dr. Watts, because it's right. It's where the board does its business in the public.
It's where the board does the public's business in public.
The board does the board's business.
The board
part of that board's
represents
business is public, right? But again, that's why there's no interaction, right? That's why, there's no answering questions and doing all of those things because we take it back and address that later. But it is a board meeting that is done in the public to handle the board business. And so I think thank you for that reminder.
By law, we represent the constituents, the taxpayers. So the board's business is, in essence, the public's business.
Absolutely.
So when the board is conducting the public's business at a meeting, and there are board directors that are have business that they've requested to discuss, and it doesn't get, this has been an ongoing thing. So Director Benno, I have a question, a Robert's Rule question, a parliamentary procedure question for you. So essentially, as I look at number 13, to your point, parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules, during a meeting, a regular meeting, a board director can make a motion and it doesn't have to be on the agenda. That's correct.
That's correct. But that's why I asked what rules we followed, because we don't follow necessarily, we follow a form of Roberts, but it's not Robert's Rules of Order as the board. And we follow the board version of, and I'm not really familiar with it, so I can't answer that. I can get familiar with it. They're all very similar. Parley Pro is my jam, but I'm not familiar with how, I obviously know the meeting process, so that's how we follow, but I really can't answer the specifics. I don't know who the parliamentarian for our board is. I don't know, but they would know better.
Well, I think as I understand it, we do follow Robert's Rules, and I don't think that WASDA has its own special version of Robert's Rules. And so I think we do follow Robert's Rules. So essentially, number 13 could just say, we agree to follow the agenda process to ask the board president or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda, period. And that leaves it open. Robert's Rules leave it open that, a board director can make a motion essentially about anything at a regular meeting, not at a special meeting, but at a regular meeting. As I understand, as I've always understood Robert's Rules, a board director can make a motion about anything, whether it's on the formal agenda or not.
Do we though follow Robert's rules exactly? I don't think we do. Like,
No,
that's my
not for
question.
these protocols.
don't.
These protocols, some of these don't speak to Robert's rules, when we're talking about
Many of them don't. speak
one
Robert's
of the board reaches a decision, all board
Right.
members will support the decision. I
Right.
mean, these are not Robert's
They're not
rules.
Robert's.
So
Right.
Right.
these are protocols.
These are our, yes, how we
how we
govern
conduct
ourselves.
our-
And I
yeah.
think how we
Right.
conduct ourselves to where our meetings are run efficiently and run in a way to where we can all know what's happening and know what's coming up. And
Mhm.
again, I just ask about, giving respect to the ability to get whatever questions or agenda items we bring up answered and responded to. So I think that that's a piece that we can't not consider, is that, when we bring something up, so we have an opportunity to review the agenda prior to it being prior to the meeting. So if there's something else that you wanted to add to the agenda, possibly it could come after you've reviewed the agenda and say, you know what, I had requested this to be on the agenda, and then someone needs to respond to say, whether or not, maybe we couldn't get it on this one, but we could get it on that one. I just don't like the idea of someone bringing up something and adding something for discussion to the agenda on the spot, when again, we could be putting our staff and other people at a disadvantage of being able to answer or respond to that. That's just how I feel about it. I think that I'm thinking about the ability of our staff to respond and for us to get in and have an intelligent discussion about whatever it is might come up. So that's just, and I understand, I totally respect how you feel about it. And I'm just saying,
Mhm.
that's how I feel about it. I don't think that it's
Yeah.
necessary.
Well,
At that
and-
time, I think
and
our
I-
process needs to be followed. That's what I think. I think our process needs to be followed.
So then I say we just remove the language that says instead of bringing it up unexpectedly at the meeting, because I mean, as I said, my intent always as being a board director, I make every single effort to ask my questions well in advance. I make every single effort to ask for items to be on the agenda before we came up with the form. That's why we came up with a form, because
Sure.
I was struggling to get any of my agenda requests even acknowledged in many cases. So honestly, then, if number 13 is we agree to follow the agenda process to ask the board president or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda, period. But I understand that in the rare occasion where if I find myself or another board director finds himself in a position where there's something they want to discuss, the board's work, the board's business with fellow board members, we can't do it over email. We can't do it in an executive session. And it's something that they feel is important enough to discuss, and the request hasn't been responded to, Robert's rules, which are above and beyond the protocol guidelines, which is what we follow. I think policy says we follow Robert's rules. But these are our agreed upon policy guidelines, to just cut out the language that says instead of bringing it up unexpectedly at the meeting,
Mhm.
and just remove that language. I would be comfortable with that. Like I said, I never intend to put anyone on the spot. I always ask my questions in advance, as whenever possible, unless a new question arises from an answer I've gotten.
Mhm.
So do people feel comfortable removing instead of bringing it up unexpectedly at the meeting?
Well, I have just a general question is, I'm not sure where we're making an analogy from if P then Q. In other words, if something is brought up that was important enough to be brought up, I don't see why our staff would be put on the spot if they didn't have any prior knowledge to that, if it's just bringing it up to get the issue started to look into. I'm not sure why you feel, President Daniels, that it would be an attack on our staff, because if it's brought up,
I didn't say attack.
okay, if you feel it putting them on the spot then,
Mhm.
or making them feel uncomfortable, I'm not sure why that would be the only conclusion in that, because I don't, personally, I never want to make any of our staff, even if it's an agenda or a non-planned agenda, My questions are only to better my knowledge and to help our kids and our parents and stakeholders make this the best district there is. So I'm not sure where that, you know, I don't feel that they, I mean,
Well, I
it
can
could just be
clarify.
starting it could be just starting a conversation and we look into it further. I'm just kind of a loss here.
Well, we ask them to look into it further. Typically, like when there's a presentation and we have questions, they say, you know what, I'll research that and get back to you. So we do ask that. But again, as a staff member, and I have seen our staff be uncomfortable when they were put on the spot or questioned in a certain way by this board. And so I'm just saying that I think as a courtesy to our staff so that they can be best prepared to respond. If there's something, I just think personally that, again, as a staff member, you want to be able to completely respond to and address and present to whatever you've been asked, right? You've prepared to do this because you're asked to do this. And so I think sometimes when other things come up that they may not have been prepared to address at that time, I just think it's an uncomfortable situation. And you may not have ever been in that situation, so you may not understand. I've seen it happen. And I'm just asking as a common courtesy that we allow our staff to be prepared to address the items that are on the agenda that we have our meeting set for. So, and it's not an attack. I'm not saying it's an attack. I'm just saying there are times when questions have been asked and our staff was not prepared, and I could see the discomfort levels. And so I'm just saying, you know, with something that's not even on the agenda or not even involved with their presentation, it's something that's been, you know, something about something totally different, and they're caught off guard. And so I'm just saying that as a common courtesy to allow them to be best prepared and to allow us to get the answers that we want. I just feel as though it's best to not have things come up on the floor that don't have anything to do with the agenda that's already set.
I can totally understand that. I guess I look at it from a different angle of I'm never going to know everything that I need to know about anything. And if it comes up, I'll just say, that's something I really need to do further research on. I mean, I guess I don't look at it
Sure,
in there.
just different.
Yeah.
Yeah, just different.
Yeah.
So I think just saying, I don't know, I feel like we're making this complicated because obviously if we bring up something unexpectedly, no one's going to have an answer or a response, including the board. So there's nothing to stop anyone from saying at a board discussion or report point, this has come to my attention that it's really important that we discuss. And then, you know, that gives time for the board president and Dr. Watts to kind of look at placing it on the next agenda, because honestly, you can bring up something during a meeting, but nobody's going to have context and going to be able to have a discussion with anyone who brings up something unexpectedly. So I feel like we're spending too much time on something that doesn't make any sense. Even the point of getting an agenda form on the agenda, we really didn't have any solutions at that point. Then Dr. Watts sent some solutions on how to do that, forms, etc. So then, you know, it became an agenda item. So I don't really see this being problematic. I think if it doesn't get on the agenda, you can state that this did not get on the agenda during your board discussion, and then everybody's held accountable to making sure it goes on the agenda next time.
Yeah,
And I appreciate everything you're saying. And I have tried all of those things. And that's what led to the form.
Right.
And so for anyone who's still got agenda items that never got on the agenda, then this is probably a very confusing conversation. But for anyone who's had difficulty getting items on the agenda to discuss, this is an important conversation, and it's important in oversight role and representing constituents and taxpayers that every board director have a voice. And so again, this is very important to me, that we leave it open. So like I said, I'm willing to leave it at, we agree to follow the agenda process to ask to ask the board president or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda, period. And
But
then,
Vice President Benjer, you haven't had that issue since we established this process. So I know you said that in the past,
yes,
that's what you've had.
have.
But well, okay, but you just said you had, okay, so help me understand, because you
I
said
have.
you had.
I keep our, so going back to our earlier conversation,
Yes.
I keep our board goals in a binder on my desk. I look at them before our meetings.
Okay.
I saw that we were going to fail on our goal of the communication protocol, the communication guidelines. And so I sent a request
In December.
and I sent
Prior-
it two more times
Okay.
in my questions for an upcoming meeting. I attached it. I'm pretty confident I attached it at least 2 more times.
Okay, and I'm just saying, I didn't find it, so I'm just saying, again, so that sounds like a one-off, because the other agenda item you requested got responded to immediately. And I know Director Hamada has presented, so I'm just saying, the process seems like it's working. And so if there was a one incident where it didn't work, definitely, again, I'm willing to take responsibility for that. If you say you sent it to me and I can't find it or didn't see it, but I'm just saying the process seems to be working. So I guess I just don't understand since it's been set in place and it's working. But I do agree, someone should be able to say, hey, this didn't get on there or whatever, and I'd like to add it in the discussion time or whatever. I just don't think we should discuss the agenda item during that meeting. I think that was where the confusion was, because there's nothing wrong absolutely with saying, hey, I had some concerns about this, I brought it up and it didn't get, but I don't feel as though we should place it on that meeting to be discussed during that meeting. That's where I think the confusion might be.
I'll just say this is a hill I'm willing to die on. I don't agree with number 13 as written.
Okay.
So hearing that, and given our time, it is now 7:27. We have 3 minutes remaining. What is the pleasure of the board for well, we're never finished with this work. Are there any final comments or
I have a
additional information?
small, excuse me, Dr. Watts, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Sure, thank you.
Number 3, I have a small thing that's a problem for me. Maybe
Okay.
we could get through this one really quick and maybe not, or I'll give up. But on number 3, let me see here.
Individual board members?
No, wait a minute. Got the wrong one apparently. Wait a minute. What have I got here? Number 2, excuse me.
Okay.
I have a problem. I don't like the community matters. I'm fine on most operational, and if you want to say procedures and staff, but I want to remove the community on that.
Can you
Say
help me
more.
understand?
Say more, yeah.
I just think that the community, we're supposed to be the individuals representing the community as elected officials or representatives that, if you read that, the superintendent is the chief executive officer, totally agree, and should recommend, propose, and suggest on most operational, if that was operational, staff and procedure matters before the board. Have no problem with it. But on most operational and community matters, I don't want that community in there. It just bothers me.
It
Can I
bothers
add
you?
something to that?
Yes.
Like I know in Renton, our superintendent, the city of Renton, the Seahawks,
Yeah.
all kind of collaborated
Together,
to
Absolutely.
open a community center
Yeah.
to support the people in Benson area that don't have services because they were annexed recently and they don't have services like a community center or not. And so our superintendent was a part of that. And that was a very integral piece to have
Right.
the school community kind of included in that. So I'm actually okay with community matters because that was a community matter and it was a partnership between organizations that is beneficial. So I think in some ways that the superintendent does represent some community
Absolutely.
matters of interest, things like I have Renton references, sorry, but like one of our pools used to be a King County pool, but then like the community wanted to keep it, so the city or the Renton School District decided to keep on the pool because King County was going to close it. So there's certain things like that I think are really beneficial, that actually our community matters, and the superintendent does have to have some jurisdiction in that. So for me, I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
No,
And-
I appreciate that.
Director Director Bento, I understand what you're saying on that, and I know Dr. Watts was part of the Y development in that board, and that's important. I get that, but I don't think he should be the chief executive officer only on the community matters. I think it should say that the board also has that same level of commitment.
No, I appreciate that. Director Hamada, may I just offer this as another way to see the language, and language is important, and it is 7:30 given our time. It says the superintendent is the chief executive officer and should recommend, propose, and suggest on most operational community matters.
Right.
In my mind, when there are very few matters that are solely operational or solely community, typically, let's use the pandemic as one example. We are engaged with our community on all sorts of operational matters that are impacted by the COVID public health crisis that also impact our community. So that includes our schools, our building administrators who are the mayors of their own respective school community. That includes how we feed our students, our families. I would find it difficult for me to separate operational and community matters, but it doesn't say that I'm the only person. It says on most, and I would argue that you as board members are certainly a part of that work, and we clearly share that role in supporting our community.
If I may offer the markup, Director Hamada, it used to read the superintendent as chief executive officer and should recommend, propose, and suggest on most matters before the board. It didn't say operational community. We added that this last time around.
Yeah, we did. I think it's important also. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay, that helps me to understand. And I'll back off on that. And I do want to apologize to Director Benno. I pronounced his name incorrectly, and forgive me. I seem to have a trouble with names on this board. So I did not do that on purpose. Please forgive me.
You're forgiven. It's all good.
When you say on most, okay. Thank you. I get it. I don't have a problem with it. Yeah.
So it's 7:32, and I'm wondering, I don't know that we're going to come to resolve on 13. I think we just may have to deal with it when we vote on it. And I guess I'm not sure what, or unless we want to continue discussing it another time. But I don't know that we're going to come to agreement. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know that we're going to agree.
I would make that recommendation. Yeah.
I agree, President Daniels, but I also think that in good faith, if I'm going to accept all this and go forward, I can't just be checking the box and then going and doing something differently. I think these are very, very important. And I know it's probably an impossible task to have a unanimous approval of this, but to me, it's a value system too. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Oh, completely. But saying that, we've spent a lot of time. We've spent hours and hours on these. So I'm just saying, at some point, we have to make decisions. And so we've honored, and I totally understand that. And so I'm just suggesting there's one that we just have a bit of a disagreement on. And so, so I hope that everyone feels valued and that we've given, like I said, we spent hours and hours on this. And so, we've discussed it and we've reworked it, and obviously, and I think honestly, just like this just happened, Director Hamada, we come to a decision on language, and then when we decide that, then, someone says, oh, well, I think I want to change it again. So, I mean, I don't know that if we continue to do this, I think it's going to be continually the same thing. So I'm just suggesting that at some point, we're going to have to decide to move forward. We can wordsmith it to death, and we will if we continue to do it. I guarantee you when we come back, there's going to be another one that someone has other language changes about. And I'm just suggesting to do our business and move forward. I think we just need to figure out how we can move forward. So, however, with that being said, is there anything else, Dr. Watts, before we adjourn this meeting?
Nothing at this time.
All right. Thank everyone for their time, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Our work session is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good evening.
All right.